Hi, this is Grant from grantthomas.com, and this is my final few hours in this, the Mk1 Nissan LEAF. Just collecting it from WKB Nissan. It's just had its third service and its first MOT straight through. No problems at all. And this really is my update video. If you saw my original one, and when I say original, that was the day one video I had 3 years ago now. What do we had? About 16,000 hits on that on YouTube. Bizarrely, my one on the Mitsubishi Outlander has done double that. But this really is the goodbye video for this car, which has been a fantastic car. I've got real mixed feelings about it because the new one, and we are lucky that for the past 6 months we've actually had 2 Nissan Leafs, so I'll cover that in a second. But let's just talk about this car and why it's going. So this was a car I chose way back in, when was that, March 2012. It took a number of months because I had to let my existing lease car go, and then this was delivered on the 22nd of August 2012, and frankly I've been smiling ever since. This is the Japanese built Nissan Leaf. All the new ones here in Europe are built in Sunderland, but this is the original one, hence the light interior. And I'm just trying to get onto a busy roundabout. We're heading near to rush hour here, so I apologise. And let me give you a kind of state of health. So this has done 34,042 miles. It is being collected tomorrow morning, Friday the 31st of July. And it still has all 12 battery capacity bars remaining. So this has been outperforming, I think, even Nissan's best estimates. When they originally put this onto the road, they weren't sure how well it was going to do. And they've actually now got versions of this car with over 100,000 miles on the clock. So outperforming anything it could have estimated. So there's a taxi company basically in Cornwall that's done 100,000 miles. And those taxis that have done 100k still have all 12 capacity bars, and much more than that, they're still on the very first set of brake pads because of the technology which uses the braking system of the car to slow the car down. So, and actually I was just talking to the service manager at WKB. One of the tyres on this car is still original. So actually, even though this was registered in 2012, this car was a year old when it was registered as new. So this is actually a 2011 built Japanese Leaf. Obviously it takes a while to get from Japan to here. So one of these tyres is now 4 years old and has done 34,000 miles. The only other reason the other ones have been changed, 2 of them were wearing low and the third one had a puncture. And in fact that is the only time we've had to call a recovery truck in those 3 years, was to, and in the end of the day it didn't go on the back of the truck anyway. They repaired it at the roadside in terms of temporary fill and got it back home, and the tyre was replaced the next day. So all of those questions that you get and those concerns that people say when considering an electric car, none of them have come true. So I've never been stranded. We've never got to a position where we've had to call out a truck to recover. There was one instance in the early days, and I'm talking first 6 months of ownership, where I'd actually called ahead, made sure that there was a rapid charger available at the Nissan dealership I was going to, turned up there and it was broken. In fact, I dropped the family off at a fun park a few miles away and nipped down to charge it whilst they were having lunch or something, only to find out that it wasn't up and running. But in fairness, the dealership were at the point where they were going to give me an ordinary car to get home whilst they got their rapid charger fixed, and at the last minute the rapid charger jumped into action. Those were early days. They were the Mk1 rapid chargers. None of those exist anymore. Now they've all been replaced or upgraded. So let me talk about the charging infrastructure really, because that's come on leaps and bounds as well. When I first got this car, there were about 81, 82 rapid chargers on the ground installed in the UK, and they were typically at Nissan dealerships that were only open or only accessible during office hours, and there was nothing else. So you couldn't really use this for longer journeys unless you were travelling in office hours, and I did do a longer journey in it. In this very car I took it up from my home on the south coast of the UK up to the Silverstone race circuit when we broke the world record for the longest electric car convoy. So, and it made it. I actually stopped twice for a rapid charge, and then I got to the hotel where I was staying the night before, and I'd phoned ahead for the hotel and they'd confirmed that they had a 3-pin plug. In fact, they had a load of 3-pin plugs in the garden for when they do outside weddings, so I was able to plug into that. So even in those early days, I didn't get stranded, and there were ways around it. Now, today, the 30th of July 2015, I've just checked, there are 1,236 rapid chargers in the ground in the UK. There were 80 3 years ago, there's over 1,200 now. Every single service station in the UK now has at least one rapid charger, some have 4. If I think about the M3, there are 2 rapid chargers northbound, 2 southbound on the fleet services, for instance. So it's quite simple now to plan a trip where you can build in rapid charging as part of that longer journey. Now, what has happened in those intervening 3 years is some of the purchasing models have evolved as well, and I'll explain that. So I alluded at the beginning of this video that we have another Nissan LEAF. I am leasing that LEAF on a PCP for 2 years. It's a brand new, when I took it in March, 2015 Mark II Nissan LEAF. I've gone for the Tecna, which is the top of the range one with the heated leather seats, and I've also specified the 6.6 charger. So I've got that for 2 years. And what was I saying about the rapid charging? With the 6.6 charger on that, that also means it's very quick to charge it from an ordinary charging station. So if I plug that in at home for an hour, it recharges 30% of the battery pack. Now, no one really runs their LEAF down to flat. So the difference there is that when I get home and the car is, say, 30-35% charged, I can plug it in, and within an hour I'm leaving with, you know, 65-70% charged. Great example, a couple of weeks ago we had a family barbecue in the middle of the New Forest. It was right at the edge of what the car could do on a single journey, but I found a pub which had some charging installed by the Zero Carbon World charity, and I popped out, sat in the pub, had a lovely pint of beer, and obviously only 3%, jumped back in the car, and after 40 minutes worth of charging, it was up to 75-80% because it had the 6.6 charging. But what I was trying to say about the purchasing models with these new cars is they've now evolved it, and the dealership I bought mine from offers this service, which is an ordinary car's usage. So for, I'm just letting someone out here, when I purchase the car on this PCP lease, there is now an option where I can have access to an ordinary car for 2 weeks a year. And we've already used that. So if you don't want to stop and use that rapid charging because you don't want to build in 20 or 30 minutes worth of time to stop and use that, or if you're trying to get somewhere for a particular time, and I'll give you our example, 2 weddings we had to get to, you know, we might not have that time or even the flexibility to stop and charge for 20 minutes, or if we stop and turn up and somebody else is using that, we might have to wait for 40-50 minutes because somebody else might be using it, and there's going to be a delay whilst we're waiting for them to finish using it. So my point of this ramble is I can actually choose to use an ordinary car for those occasional trips. So for 95% of the journeys, the Nissan LEAF is great, but if you want to do a longer journey, or if you want to do a trip without having to stop and charge, you just jump into another car, and that's exactly what we've done. So when we've gone to these weddings, we've picked up the phone, spoken to WKB Nissan. They provided us with a replacement car, a Nissan Qashqai, totally pleasant drive, functional, and use 20-30 quid's worth of petrol for that journey. Makes you realise how expensive petrol is, and then literally come back, hand the keys back, and jump back into the LEAF. It's really the way that we need to consider future car usage. We can't keep buying cars or a one-size-fits-all car. If you commute to work in a car, it's probably just you, and if you look to the cars around you, there are probably great big 7-seater minivans or little buses. For 90% of those journeys, there's only going to be one person in it, so why do we keep buying? Now, I think we need to apply that kind of mentality to the way we drive and use cars. A Nissan LEAF is going to fit for the overwhelming majority of all UK car drivers. And if they can build in that mentality that says, for that once-a-year holiday, for that trip to go and see Aunt Flo at the other end of the country, I'll just phone up and book another car. So that's a great service to offer. It's not just Nissan. BMW have done a way they built it in with points, and you can choose to spend those points if you like for an ordinary car, or you can save those points up and get a great big, what's their big 4x4, an X5 or an X3 or something. So that's a more innovative way. But let's get back to this car. I've loved driving this car. It's quick. people don't expect it because, in the words of one very good friend of mine, it looks like an old granny's car, which I think is painfully unfair. I think this looks unremarkable. If you look at all the other electric cars that went before this, they were funny bubble shapes or they weren't really usable. You know, the Nissan, not the Nissan, the Citroen C0, the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, all the same car with a different badge on the front. That was the predecessor to this kind of car, and it was a funny narrow thing that, you know, it looked odd. Whereas this doesn't. I can drive this along and it's about the size of a Volkswagen Golf or a Vauxhall Astra, and nobody bats an eyelid until they're right next to it and it's completely silent. It's got 5 seats, it's been plenty enough for our family. We have 3 kids between us and a big enough boot to put the dog in as well. So, and we've had roof racks. You know, we've got the temporary roof rack that you can put on this, so we've been able to transport stuff to the tip, pick up flat pack furniture from IKEA, go on holiday and put bikes on top of the car. We've had a canoe on top of the car. You know, it's been a really versatile family car, and people don't realise that. And some of the other electric cars on the market right now, you can't do that with, for instance. You know, go and spend 40, 50 grand on a BMW i3, you've got a boot you can't fit anything in, and a roof you can't put anything on either. My voice is going to go in a second. By the way, I still love the i3, it's a great car. So, it's going tomorrow, this car. Why? Well, obviously our lease is up and we've chosen a replacement vehicle. This is a company car, so I do now pay company car tax on this. That's another change. When I first got this car, there was absolutely no company car tax. It was 0%. And I don't want to get too much on my political pedestal, but sorry. The Conservative government that we now have decided to tax all cars that give out less than 50 CO2 in the same bucket. So whether you have a car with a small electric range and then an engine, that's in the same bucket as a car like this, which gives out absolutely nothing. It's a zero emissions car. And to me, that's stupid. And that's been further compounded by the latest budget we had, this summer budget in 2015, where they've now scrapped the car tax, the road fund licence, what it costs you to drive a car in this country. They've scrapped it based on emissions. So before it was quite sensible. If you had a great big 4x4 giving out 200 or 300 grams of CO2 per kilometre, then you paid through the nose. You paid £400 for a licence, which makes sense because you're polluting the most and causing the biggest health issues. Now they've scrapped that and they're bringing in 3 schemes. One for zero emission cars, a second one for all cars up to £40,000, and then a third range for premium, if you like, everything over £40,000. Now, that means if you go and get a BMW i3 Rex, a great electric car which has a small engine in it, because of its price point, that's going to be more expensive to drive. You're going to have to pay £400 a year to tax that thing versus a cheap 4x4. I don't know, let's say a Kia, what's it called, Sorento or something like that. A car which costs a lot less than that but gives out much more emissions. So, you know, we have a major problem right now with the government in this country, which are really cancelling a whole load of green and sustainable initiatives. They're cancelling wind subsidies for onshore wind, they're ending that early, they're ending solar subsidies early, and the one that's important to this car, or electric cars, there's been a £5,000 government grant here in the UK. So if you buy a car, an ultra low emission car, then you get £5,000 from the government towards the cost of the car. That's exactly the scheme that was there. It was put in place in 2010, I think. And it was for the first 50,000 cars or 2017, whichever was sooner. So this car has had the £5,000 grant applied to it. My current lease car, the Leaf, has had the £5,000 grant, and also the replacement car for this, which is a Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, that's had the £5,000 grant. But it's about to run out because there are now lots of plug-in hybrid cars. And the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV I just mentioned is now the best-selling electric car, plug-in electric car in the UK. Look at my other YouTube video, but the headlines there are, it does about 27 miles on electric, and then it has a 4-cylinder petrol engine that takes over to either act as a generator or drive the car, or both. So it's a plug-in hybrid and is the best-selling electric car because, as a company car driver, the tax rate is the same as this car, which kind of bugs me because right now this car is a zero emission car that gives out nothing, no nasties out the back of it. However, my bugbear is it's ridiculous to have a car like the Outlander that we're taking tomorrow on a 2-year lease, in the same tax bucket, because that is a 2-ton 4x4, which, whilst it does have a plug-in electric, and whilst it's bringing a whole range of drivers to the electric car market who would never have considered an electric car, it does seem slightly bananas to have all of the benefits, but it still kicks out huge emissions when the electric range is expired. I'm going to have to take a drink of water, excuse me. So you can drive one of those Outlanders into the middle of London, pay no congestion charge, park for free in many boroughs, yet you could well be only running on electric by the time you get there. Now, the optimist in me hopes that our balanced government realises this is unsustainable and really needs to bring in a different scheme of taxation for both road fund licence and company car tax, so that cars that are purely battery driven, like this, don't pay anything or pay a far reduced rate, and those that do have some kind of plug-in extended engine, range engine, be that a Rex in an i3, be that the plug-in hybrid in the Outlander, they should pay a different price. And I think that's what the government's going to do with this £5,000 grant replacement. So they haven't announced what it's going to be, but within weeks of this video being recorded, there will be no more £5,000 government grant. So if you're considering getting a plug-in electric car and want to take advantage of that, get it soon. I'm hoping that they'll bring out a scheme which offers a preferential subsidy to zero-emission cars. Put the soapbox away now. What else can I tell you about this car? Really, it's just worked. Now I am waxing lyrical and slightly emotional because I'm giving this car up tomorrow, and it's kind of it's the car. I'm calling it the car that changed everything, because, like I said a few minutes ago, it's the first car that didn't look that unnormal. So it really fits the usage pattern and the size and the format. A great mid-range, well, normal family car. It's not a micro car, it's not an estate, it's just a good usable 5-seater car. And really that's what made people take this seriously, which is why it is the best-selling electric car in the world. And I think what we've now seen is such a sea change in electric car availability. I think every single manufacturer now has some kind of either electric, fully electric, or plug-in hybrid variant. I was at the Goodwood Festival of Speed a few weeks ago, and all the manufacturers were showing their latest makes and models, and there were, you know, Audi's got their, what do they call it, the A3 e-tron. They had an A4, I think it's called e-tron. They had the Q7 e-tron there as well. So I think it's called an e-tron, but basically a plug-in hybrid variant where it does about 20 miles electric, and then the engine kicks in to charge the battery up and work in a hybrid mode. Volkswagen had the e-Golf there, which is 100% battery driven, or it had their Golf GTE, which again has that kind of 20-mile range. So we're seeing more and more manufacturers, Volvo, they've all got some kind of plug-in hybrid variant. And I think we're now seeing the normalization of the electric car, if that's even a word. So whereas 3 years ago, and I don't mind being a bit of an early adopter of this stuff, trying the technology out, acknowledging there's going to be some shortcomings, and there have been on this. Let me paint a unrealistic panacea. In the winter, the Mk1 LEAF, and I'm going to say it again, the Mk1 LEAF sucks. Because the Mk1 LEAF, right now, I've got this blowing cool air on me. And as soon as you ask it to blow cool air, it kicks up the air conditioning engine. And that uses lots of power. And the heating element in this, well, the heating element is pretty much a fan heater. In fact, it's a kettle pushing air through it. It uses huge amounts of energy. So if you're, as Jo, my other half, she's taken this to work in the winter, and to do a 40 or 35 mile, 40 mile round trip, it starts getting touch and go if you're driving in the rain and it's cold. And the reason why I say the rain and it's cold, because you'll need to have the windscreen wipers on, you'll need to have the demisters on. To have the demisters, you need to have the air conditioning on. And if it's cold, you need to have the heater as well. So you've got the aircon, the heat on, and the range on this thing drops from the aspirational 100 miles and it drops down to about 50. And there have been times where she's been driving home along a particular stretch of motorway, freeway, here in the south coast of the UK. There's been some kind of road traffic accident, long tailbacks, taking a long time to get home, and it starts getting really near. You know, she might get home with only a couple of bars left. Now, that couple of bars actually represents 20 miles or so. But you know, you get nervous when you start dropping into the red of a car fuel gauge. You get nervous, the same experience when you drop into the red of an electric car range. And I guess I'm in the fortunate position where I can jump out of this and then into the Mark II, the Techno, which we own. So we're able to compare these two cars, and all the niggles in this car, apart from one, all the niggles in this car have been fixed on the Mark II Leaf. The drive is far more firm, it's far more European feel. The light interior is all dark on the Mark II Leaf. It's got a better choice of alloy wheels, it's got much better instrumentation, heated wheel, heated seats, and it has, the heating system is much better. So the heating system inside the Mark II Leaf is all built on a heat pump, so it actually uses, well, it's the opposite of a fridge. You know, most of you know what a heat pump is. Instead of cooling air, it compresses air and heats. So it uses very little energy to maintain a temperature inside the cabin of the car. So in the winter, when you are relying on that heat, there might be a little burst of heat or a little burst of energy at the beginning, which gets that initial heat there, and then it'll just tick over at sort of 800 watts rather than 3000 watts, which is what this particular Mark 1. So the heating's a huge improvement. Camera system on the Mark II. On the Techno, it's got those 360-degree cameras. So it has cameras out of each side. On the wing mirrors, it has a camera at the front and a camera at the back. So that means when you are trying to park the car, it does this spectacular job of overlaying that onto the actual screen, and it overlays it as a kind of bird's eye view. So when you're trying to park into a parking space, you actually see the white lines as you're reversing it in. It's great, it is. So the new one's got lots of nice new features. Now, I say new, this is being recorded on the 30th of July 2015. We're about to see an incremental upgrade, I believe, in September on this particular Leaf. So I think we'll see a new battery coming onto this car, which probably will take it into about the 110 real world range, not the book range. But I think it's going to be 2017 before we see those longer range cars. So I think it'll be 2017 before we see the 200-mile range electric cars, the usable ones. I know we have Tesla Model S's out there, but they're £80,000 to get, you know, 200-300-mile ranges. I think we're going to see the £30,000 cars with 200-mile ranges in 2017. So the replacement for this, the Outlander PHEV, I'm only taking on a 2-year lease, the same as my Nissan LEAF Techno I only have on a 2-year lease, because I think we're going to see those changes in quite a short amount of time. And I think I know from having this on a 3-year lease just how quickly the technology has jumped forward. It's more like owning a PC than it is driving a car, because the technology is leaping forward that much. So my key takeaways from this would be buy a second-hand Leaf, because this car is going to be worth, by the time it goes up for 30, it's got 34,000 miles on it, I reckon this car will be worth between £5,000 and £6,000 at auction. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. This will do 70 miles if you drive it carefully. It's more than okay for doing double the average daily UK car journeys, which is only 27 miles. It's got a rapid charging socket on the front of it. You can charge it for home for next to nothing. It is still 90% cheaper to drive an electric car than an internal combustion engine. And you would be mad to not consider buying this kind of electric car. The internal combustion engine is dead. It has no place in the future of personal mobility. We need to be looking at different types of car. And excuse me, I'm just going to pay attention here. I'm going to be going past a horse and round a corner. So I firmly believe the internal combustion engine, it's just unreliable. A great example, a couple of months ago, Jo was in the other Leaf. She was driving back from actually Southampton Airport. There had been a major incident on the M27 where the road had been closed all day. There had been some crash and a fire where the road surface had actually melted, the intensity of the fire. Long story short, it was gridlock, and to get home, a journey which normally takes 20 minutes took 2.5 hours. And I posted this on Facebook, and people were commenting, well, is the battery going to be okay? Are you going to get home all right? Well, yes, because unlike all the other cars who are making that journey, when you're not moving anywhere in an electric car, it doesn't use any power. And lo and behold, what made that tailback and that situation worse was internal combustion engine cars breaking down. They were overheating. A taxi caught fire on one particular roundabout. Another couple of cars broke down because they'd just been stationary for too long. you know, the internal combustion engine relies on air being sucked through this inefficient old beast to try and keep the thing cool. So, you know, just one example of how, and all those fumes that it's going, oh, don't even, I drive behind 10-year-old cars now, 10-year-old diesel cars, and the amount of black carcinogenic smoke that comes out the back of those things. We should ban any diesel car that's over 10 years old. That may sound radical, that's me getting a bit emotional, but there are plenty of studies now that say, forget the CO2 figure, it's all the other nasties that come out the back of it, which the World Health Organization has now said do cause cancer. There is a direct link between diesel emissions and cancer. Now, if I told you that drinking milk would give you cancer, you'd probably stop drinking milk tomorrow. But we're still driving around in diesel cars as if it's perfectly acceptable to do so. It is not acceptable to drive diesel cars anymore. We need to be considering some kind of electric car. And I'm I accept the point that if you can only afford one car, if you're not a two-car family, that some kind of plug-in hybrid would be fine. But if you're in two cars, if you're a two-car family, as we are, then I would suggest that make one of them an electric car, because you're still going to have that other car to do the longer journeys, to do the trips out if you're doing that holiday or you need that emergency trip. You know, you want that reassurance of having that longer range car, that 400 mile or 300 mile before refilling it with fuel. You know, have that ordinary car, but get one of these as the other car. And it's strange what happens when you do that. A bit like when people take these plug-in hybrids, they actually not obsess, but they want to get the most out of that electric range because it's too expensive to run cars on petrol. And what happens, and a prime example, so in the 3 years we've had this car, we've actually gone through 3 internal combustion engine cars. So when this was delivered back in 2012, Joe had an old Peugeot 306. Lo and behold, it's a Peugeot, so it breaks down, things went wrong on it. To get it started in the winter, you had to put a heater, a physical fan heater on top of the engine. Great, you know, that went, got it fixed, and we got rid of that. I then bought my midlife crisis, which was a Volkswagen EOS. I loved that car, loved the roof, the convertible roof on that. Hello, I'm just going past a Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. And yeah, loved that car, but even though I'd spent a lot of money on it and lovingly put it in the garage every night, so it was well looked after, I actually positively chose not to drive it to do the longer journeys. So because the cost of fuel is so great, it was a diesel 2 litre, because this is so cheap to run, and you know, you plug it back in at home and it costs, what is it? It's actually costs about £1.80. People, and that's the other big change, sorry, I'm keep diving off at tangents here, but the cost of fuel has gone down greatly there. The cost of oil crashed last year, so the cost of diesel and petrol went down. And there were a few people going and posting on my various social feeds saying, oh well, Grant, I know my petrol now has gone right down so low, I don't need an electric car. I said, fine. Now you can put that on my Facebook feed or whatever, as long as I can then retaliate, because I guarantee you, this temporary drop in fuel that you're evangelising about can't survive, because the oil companies control, they have OPEC. They have a cartel, OPEC, that controls the cost of oil, and they will reduce supply to force the price up. Guess what's happened? The price has gone back up about 30%. So it's ridiculous to pin your entire mobility strategy, a car, on a fuel source that you have no control over. The Chancellor of the Exchequer does not know whether I'm cooking my Christmas turkey or charging my electric car. I only pay 5% VAT on my domestic electric supply. On petrol, you pay 20% VAT. You also have to pay fuel duty. So the point I made, and I'm purposely now driving along a road that I actually recorded when I did the original video, see if you recognise it. And I made the same point actually going along here 3 years ago. It's quite bizarre. And I put a little picture up here when I did it. You know, the internal combustion engine is what is it, 10–20% efficient. The rest of it's wasted as heat, energy, everything else. Go back and look at the video. All the points I made then are even more true today. I charge this car at home from either my solar PV panels, which cost me nothing, so I drive for free, driven by sunshine, or I plug it into my standard electric tariff, and I now pay less for my electric than I paid 3 years ago. And that's fixed. It's fixed for until February next year again. So every year I renew my fixed rate electric deal, and I know exactly what it's going to cost me to charge this car. So for 3 years, I've actually sadly taken daily readings, and I know that when Jo takes this to work, she typically uses just under 11 kilowatts. 11 kilowatts is 90p. So for Jo to drive this car 32 miles, it costs 90p to drive 32 miles. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but I've been doing these videos, blogs, and I've stood up and presented, and thank you for everyone that's invited me to those meetings to come and present, because it still fascinates me. We had our driveway done at home in the past couple of weeks, and people who are doing the drive and also the roof on the house next door, I was pulling in and out of our 2 electric cars, and they're saying, tell me about these electric cars. Are they really that good? Aren't they expensive? It's the same arguments that come up 3 years on, and because there is so little exposure of these brilliant cars in the media, the same 3 arguments stand. Don't they cost a lot of money? How much does it cost? Where can you charge it? And don't the batteries give up? Guess what? I'm leasing my brand new top of the range Tecna for less than 170 quid a month. I put a £1,500 deposit down, I'm leasing it for 2 years, and I'm giving it back. So it doesn't cost much to run. In fact, that's less than some people pay on petrol alone every month. So they don't cost much. Where do you charge it? You can plug it into any 3-pin socket in the land and it will slowly charge. And in fact, for the first 6 months that we had this car, we only plugged it into a 3-pin plug. It was an external weatherproof socket which cost £20 from Screwfix, and that's the only way we plugged it for the first 6 months. I then got a charging station, which meant that instead of being charged at 10 amps, it charged at 16 amps. That same charging station now charges the new Leaf in 3.5 hours from flat. So you can plug it in at home, you can plug it in when you're out and about, and in fact you can plug it in to the motorway service station network. Any motorway service station in the UK has a rapid charger that will charge this car from 0 to 80% in 20 minutes or thereabouts. And it's free, it still is free. So Ecotricity have put this network in, you can pull in there, you could travel from here to John O'Groats for free using only the Ecotricity network. One of my friends on social media, Jonathan Portfield from Eco Cars, I love his updates. He I think he has, or his original home's in Leicester or in Leicestershire, and he's now living up in Orkney. But he takes lots of cars from Leicester to Orkney, and he actually drives from Leicester, goes up the M1 or whatever it is, to get up to the, I think it's the M1, yeah. Anyway, he goes up right the way to Aberdeen using only the rapid chargers, then gets on the ferry and takes these cars to Orkney, which is an ideal location, a bit like the Isle of Wight here. If you've only got an island which is so big, well, you ain't going to need a car that does all those miles. So it's case in point that these long road trips are absolutely possible. You know, it takes a bit of planning, you might need to get up a bit early to do those kind of trips, but if you're that set on not wanting to use fossil fuels, it's entirely possible and it won't cost you a penny. So that's the second argument. Where do you plug them in? Anywhere. And people say, what if you're in the middle of the country? What if you're out here now in rural West Sussex like I'm now driving in? And what if you run out of charge? Well, guess what? If you're in any of the internal combustion engine cars that are going around me at the moment, you are probably 10 to 15 miles away from the nearest petrol station. Over there is a house that's just been renovated. It's a barn conversion. And if I was running short of energy, I could pull into that, knock on their door, they might be a bit surprised, offer them, ask them for a cup of tea, and say, do you mind if I plug in for an hour? You know, I'm not suggesting this is a strategy for charging, but my point is, you'd be surprised how many houses have electricity these days, because this can charge from an existing network that's already there. It's another reason why hydrogen fuel cell is a complete and utter waste of time and money. Hydrogen fuel cell only works for petrol companies. It's the only way that the oil companies can keep involved with cars, because all the time you drive these kinds of cars, I haven't had to put fuel in a car, apart from that trip to the wedding, for years. So they don't have a future business model, so the oil companies are lobbying to get hydrogen put in. But to make hydrogen work, you need to put in a whole new set of tanks and pumps, you need a whole new set of refineries, and on the sheer physics and science of it, it takes so much energy, 4 units of energy to capture 1 of usable hydrogen. So it's a complete waste of inefficient use. Whereas, guess what? Every single house has electricity, so the entire network is already there. Yes, I sound exasperated because it's such an obvious solution. Now, and this is the other thing. Now, people say, well, hang on a second, the grid can't take it. Yes, it can, because they're upgrading it. There have been great projects like the My Electric Avenue project, and well done for everybody that took the lead on that and took those cars on these 15-18 month leases. They have proved that you can intelligently manage the network. People are prepared to sign up for local management of the network, which means that there is a relationship between the substation and the car, which if that part of the network is being overloaded, they'll shut off the cars for half an hour at peak rates and then switch them back on when it's cheaper, or the grid can handle it. Or they're actually just upgrading the substations and the network. And here's the other thing. When you drive an electric car, it is the only type of fuel, the only type of car that you can drive, which the more you drive it, the greener the electric grid gets. Because 15% of our energy now comes from renewable sources here in the UK. Whereas, you know, it's, oh dear, I will say it, the complete waste of, I mean, oil is stupid. It's the internal combustion engine relies on oil. Oil has to get dragged out from parts of the world that typically have a war going on, or are run by medieval dictatorships that chop off people's hands. It then has to get pumped out the ground using electric motors, pumped over to a port using electric motors, stored in big tanks, put into these great big ships, transported from one side of the world using some of the lowest quality fuel, pumping out, God, tons of pollutants as they move this. Then it arrives into the UK at somewhere like Fawley Refinery, gets pumped out again using electric pumps, gets stored, get pumped, gets stored, get pumped, gets refined using huge amounts of energy. And they haven't published how much energy Fawley Refinery power station uses since 1995, because people are asking why a power station, an oil refinery uses more electric than Birmingham and Liverpool put together. So it uses a huge amount of electric to refine oil, then it gets pumped again using an electric motor, and then it gets put into storage tanks, then it goes into the trucks that take them to a petrol station, and then finally, when it gets to the petrol station, it comes out of a petrol pump using another electric motor, and then finally, it's in the car. And when you then drive it, you know, all of these people who set taxes and set their rates only look at that final bit. How much does it emit when you drive it? Well, that misses all the wasted energy that's been burnt when you've driven this thing, or taken the fuel all the way from the other side of the world. So it's such a complete and utter waste of fossil fuel to take it out the ground to drive a car. So please, you know, I'm hoping that I'm 37 minutes now, so I'm going to shut up in a minute. You know, from an ethical, from a moral, from an environmental, and from a financial perspective, the internal combustion engine makes absolutely no sense. I've said at the beginning of this, we need to change how we think about using cars. I'm hoping that with our blend of cars tomorrow, from tomorrow, we'll have the best of both worlds for our particular family usage. And that means that we will have the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, which is a car that will do those longer journeys if we need to do them, but will also mean that 32-mile journey that Joe does to work, about 95% of that will be on electric only. It may use a couple of egg cupfuls of fuel on the way back, but it also means in the event of any kind of incident on the motorway or a longer journey, we have choices. We can now choose that if we were to rapid charge it and we pulled in and there's two cars in front of us and the rapid charger, and that means that if there's two cars in front of us, we'd have to wait an hour. We could say, you know what, we're not going to wait an hour. We'll use a little bit of fuel for this journey and go that a bit further and then go to the next one. You know, so we have options with a Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, but we've also got the other Leaf. So we've got a Nissan LEAF Mark II Techno that will do 85 miles quite comfortably, and has a much better, it's a far more efficient user, if you like, or far more efficient electric motor than it is the Outlander, because the Outlander is a big heavy car. But it means that we've got two electric cars. We've actually modified our drive. I said we had some driveway work done. We've now got enough off-road parking. We've got two charging stations on the outside of the house, one inside the garage, and the portable EVSE. So we've actually got three charging methods at home now. So we can actually plug in both cars at once and charge them. Yes, all the loads work fine. Yes, we've mapped it all out. Yes, all the underground cables are fine. They're all armoured. Yes, there's enough 32 amp charge, 6mm armoured for the Leaf, and yes, there's enough for the 16 amp charge that the Outlander will have. People comment and get very excited when they see some of the stuff we do, so I have to put all these caveats in.
In 200 yards, speed camera.
And as you may recall, that sound is exactly the sound that was on the beginning of my video when I started 3 years ago. This really is my farewell to this car. It's going, and if you see this, by the way, if you're a future owner of this car, the registration is Bravo Papa 12 Bravo X-Ray Hotel BP12 BXH. I've called her Bex because of that BXH in the back of it. It's been an amazing car, and the one thing that this car does better than the Mk1 Nissan LEAF, and it is the only thing, it's quicker off the lights. So they've actually throttled back the torque on the Mk2 ever so slightly, because this thing will wheel spin when you put your foot down. But I tell you what, I never get bored there's a particular stretch of road, when I pick my son up on a Friday from down by Portsmouth, there's a particular stretch of road coming out of Portsmouth called the Eastern Road, and there's a set of traffic lights. It's a 50-mile-an-hour road, but there's a set of traffic lights, and the number of times I've pulled up at those and other traffic lights, and you'll have somebody pull up next to you. Hopefully it's a 17-18-year-old with a Vauxhall Corsa with just about every accessory bolted to it and a big exhaust on it, and this just sits there, and I purposely put it into drive, take off the eco mode, and you put your foot down on this thing, and the way it takes off, I have it, everything up to a BMW M3 off the lights. Now above 25-30 miles an hour, there are plenty of cars that will outpull this, torque it if you like, but up to, off the lights, because it's got no gears, there's no gearbox, it's got all of that, it's just fun. And it's called the EV Grin, and every time I get into this, and today it's a slightly emotional EV Grin, because I'm never going to get that in this car again. Now there is a perfectly good second-hand market for this. Somebody else is going to get a great car which is going to carry on for probably 200,000-300,000 miles. There is no particular reason to change the battery on this. It still has 12 bars. I do have the LEAF DD plugged into this. I will take some final snapshots in a minute when I go home and take all of the equipment out of this. But I will miss Bex. If you are the future owner, get in touch, comment on this YouTube video, or at grant@grantthomas.com. I'm delighted, and thank you for all of the comments that have been attached to both my videos on YouTube and also through the emails that have come in. It always makes me feel slightly warm and fuzzy when I realise somebody has watched these videos, realised that there is another way to go and transport your family around without causing damage to the environment. I'm glad it's inspired and pushed so many of you to go and choose these kinds of cars, and I hope that I continue to do so. By the way, I do this for fun. I don't work for any publication. I am not paid to produce any of these videos or any of the articles I write. The granththomas.com website is self-funded, and I receive I've never received any kind. In fact, in full transparency, when I organised the SOKEV meet, the South Coast EV meet in March this year, and his name has slipped my head, apologies for the head of marketing at Nissan UK, he did bring me a mouse mat. So I did in March get a mouse mat with a Nissan LEAF on the front of it. So that is the only product endorsement or inducement I've ever had, is a mouse mat. And I hope you have seen in my other videos, in the other electric cars I've driven and been lucky enough to drive, I've been equally balanced and highlighted the positives and the limitations and considerations when driving these cars. Thank you very much for watching this. I have rambled on longer than normal. It's a full 45 minutes nearly. You can reach out to me on Twitter. It's it's @GrantAThomas on Twitter. On email, it's grant@grantthomas.com, the website grantthomas.com. If you want to read more about my EV adventures, sustainability news, how we're trying to use renewable energy to both power our cars and heat our home, all over at granththomas.com. Facebook, if you want to be on Facebook, it's facebook.com/grant2. Always drop me a little note as to where you found me, why you want to add me, and I try not to add just any old random on there, but I'm always happy to network and share my EV expertise and to share knowledge and hints and tips, because that's how I learn, just by going out meeting other drivers, looking at these kinds of videos online. If you want me to cover something, by the way, in a future video, happy to do so, happy to take requests. Feel free to leave it. I'm now a mile from home in the gorgeous little village of Westbourne on the West Sussex Hampshire border. I hope this has been of use. Goodbye Bex, farewell Mk1 LEAF. She goes tomorrow morning. What a fantastic car.